Hi, my name's Serena from Photography Space, and today we're going to be talking about how to balance internal and external light. There's a couple of ways of doing this. We can either use one way which I find is simpler, and that is just a single shot using the speedlight flash and positioning your focusing point and your exposure point on an 18% or grey or mid-tones within the scene. So not in the highlights, not in the shadows, but somewhere in between. Balancing internal and external light in photo shoots that involve architecture or interiors, or photographing for builders or interior designers is often a question that we're asked about, and it's often something that people find hard to do. When I'm shooting a real estate shoot, I have all the lights on and all the lamps on within the room, and this helps to light the room, and therefore it's less contrast between indoors and outside. In a shoot that involves architecture, or I shoot for Airbnb Pro and also for interior designers, it's not as common to have the lights on because you're having different light sources. You might have yellow light sources versus natural light coming in versus blue light sources. So in those shoots, don't turn the lights on. The first technique I'm going to show you is the single shot using the speedlight flash. If we come around, we can see what settings that I would normally have the camera set up to. I'm shooting aperture priority, generally about an aperture of about f11. I do add a bit, my ISO is at about 400, just to also help to increase the ambient light inside. My flash generally for a big room like this will be at +3. My exposure compensation will be at +1. I'll have one shot because nothing's moving. I'm shooting raw. And then lastly, I've set the timer for a 2-second delay so that it stays sharp. Now I'm just going to go to live view just to show you where it's good to position your focusing or exposure point. Okay, we have the highlights here, we have the shadows, and I've positioned the focusing point about somewhere in between, so about the mid-tones, reflecting about 18% grey. So the point will be about on the books here. So the camera's been set up so that I'm at the right height. I've got a good balance between the ceiling, the floors, the scene in the middle. My horizontals and my verticals are all set up. I've got a leading line coming from the table, and now I have also positioned the head of the speedlight about 30 degrees backwards, and that's to bounce light off the ceiling. If you put the flash around the other way, you're going to get a hot spot and the light won't be evenly distributed. Now we're going to take the shot and see what the result is. 2-second delay. So pretty good. You've got detail in the highlights and the shadows, and it's, because you're shooting raw, you have lots of information to use in post-production. Now I'm going to show you the second technique of how to balance internal and external light. This is using a method that doesn't use flash, and then we bracket the exposures. So we find that by doing 2 exposures, 2 stops between each exposure, and I tend to do 3 exposures, and those exposures generally are based on -1 and +1 and +3. So if you set the camera to a 2-second delay, those 3 shots will be taken in succession. Obviously you must have the camera rock steady on a tripod so that each image then, when you merge it in Lightroom, which we'll show you after how to do, then those images are the same images being merged. So let's try that technique now. So now we're going to set up the brackets for this shot. The shot is, the central bracket will be a +1, and then we're going to add brackets that are 2 stops apart at -1 and 1 and +3. Let's see how that is. Perfect. Okay, so let's take the shot now, or the 3 shots. Sometimes it takes a little while to process. So this is a shot showing how we've exposed for the shadows and the highlights and the mid-tones. Okay, now I've imported the images into Lightroom. We have the original, or the first image, which was the one taken just with a single shot on +1 exposure. And then we have the 3 images here, which was also taken on the +1, the -1 and the +3. So we're going to select those 3 images, and then we're going to merge them together in HDR. These are raw images, they're DNG images. All right, so I'm going to merge these by going up to Photo and Photo Merge and HDR. I generally have these settings as Auto Align and Auto Settings with deghosting as none. And this is the resulting image, which I will merge. This image ends up to be a very large image. It's about, if you're shooting RAW on my Canon 5D Mark IV, it's about 90 to 100 megabytes. Right, the 2 resulting images, to compare them, let's select them. This is the one shot with the single shot on with the mid-tones, and this is the Merge HDR. And we're going to look at those and compare those 2. And as you can see, there's not a lot of difference between the 2 images, and still plenty of room for editing and getting more detail in the highlights and in the shadows, and also correcting the white balance, which has quite a yellow hue. So this is why the image on the left, which is a single image, is the way that we prefer to do these sort of shots. Okay, thanks for watching, and we hope you got a lot out of that video. You've seen the 2 ways that we prefer to shoot to get both the internal and external areas well lit, the highlights and the shadows. If you have a very contrasty scene, you may also want to perhaps increase the number of exposures you do to say 5 or 7. And each of those exposures can be 1 stop apart. It does lead to a rather large image in the end, so you've got to take that into consideration. Thank you.